We're live. It's week 6, ModPo 2021. We've been at it for 10 years plus 5 weeks. We're 5 weeks into the 10th year. And why are we not bored out of our gourds? Why? Ambrose, why are we not bored?
Because it's always improvisational. I know. It's always exciting. It's always different.
Oh, you're right. This is really weird. We are talking about, many new poems, but some of the same old poems, and it just, I don't know about you guys, but it doesn't get old. It totally doesn't get old. I'm going to start with a rant, and then I'm going to say hello to some special guests. I'm starting with, there's Jason. I'm going to start with a rant. Some of you who follow, chit-chat on Twitter, Facebook know this, but this week I found some ed tech professor guy named Patrick Hong who was complaining about the dismal completion rates of MOOCs, down with MOOCs because people don't complete them, right? And I wrote, completion is not the point of many MOOCs. Learning at one's own rate, in one's own way, Dan Bergman, is. In that sense, it's best not to compare a massive open online course with a traditional in-person course. Offering access is... I'm being told we're having sound distortion. Going out to our viewers, we're having sound distortion? I was in the middle of a great rant. Okay. Lily's like, Al's rants should be interrupted by sound distortion more often.
Hey, Webcast people, does that sound normal, or does it sound distorted to you?
It's all normal.
It's all normal?
Should we proceed, or do you have a problem? Okay. Can someone put up a... To whom? Who are you writing?
YouTube chat?
Oh, YouTube chat. Good. Okay, we're just holding on. This is the year of trouble. Did anybody alert us to that in the chat?
In the YouTube chat,
They
yeah.
did? They said we can't hear you?
Yeah, they must have seen it.
Or heard it.
I'm going to try to take this moment to troubleshoot my headphones. I'll be right back.
The Bluetooth thing.
It's a fuzz bass, says ModPo.
A fuzz bass. Boom, 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 boom. Dan, meanwhile, has a contribution to your rant. What does Dan's already contributing to the rant? Dan says, for a lot of us, ModPo is a gateway drug to a meaningful life. Oh, Dan.
Wow. Can you say that again?
Gateway drug?
Say
For
that.
a lot of us, ModPo is a gateway drug to a meaningful life. Yay, Dan.
I think that's great.
Give me some more of those drugs. There's a heart from Lily. Dan, can you see Lily? Dan, Lily's up in the screen. There's Lily's heart. Yes. You can. These guys are crazy. They were in Washington,
Sounds like a mouthful of
D.C. Yeah, Meredith is winning some kind of award once again. It's not going out on the air. Nobody can hear us. It's just fuzzy bass.
Yeah. They said it sounds like a mouthful of potatoes. That's a good volume.
Mouthful of potatoes. Okay, you want to hear a mouthful of potatoes? I'll give you a mouthful of potatoes. Hold on. Hold on. Here's a mouthful.
They are the solidities of war.
Kanar, how was your week?
It was all right. Yeah, it's been okay. A lot of miscellany to do this week, but otherwise good.
Miscellany.
Yep.
Amber Rose calls it admin. On a day when she's not working on her dissertation, it's admin. Have you been caught in admin? We're back. Hi, this is Al. We're back. We're no longer sounding like fuzzy bass. How do you know we're back? Did you solve the problem? It's extraordinary.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to give out the phone number. This is week 5. We are live. 6. Who corrected me? This is week 6. We are live. It's 2021. Amazing. We've been doing this for 10 years. I'm going to give the number out, and then I'm going to go on a little rant, and then we're going to get started. The number is 610-616-3208. 610-616-3208, or Skype to ModPo Pen. Anyway, this week I was ranting against some ed tech prof guy named Patrick P. Hong. Turns out to be a very nice guy because I'm in conversation with him later on Twitter, through Twitter. But he was going on about how completion rates in MOOCs are miserable. Dismal is his word. Generally even worse than traditional in-person classes, he says. And I replied, completion is not the point of many MOOCs. Learning at one's own rate, in one's own way is. In that sense, it's best not to compare a massive open online course with traditional in-person courses. Offering access is a huge benefit of good MOOCs. And then I did something, as I usually do, because I'm not good moving between and among the social media plural. I actually did a screenshot of that exchange, and I put it in Facebook, and I got lots of responses, and I want to read 2 of them. I want to read 2 of them because I'm feeling all jazzed up about what we've been doing in this thing, making a community in this weirdest way, using a for-profit commercial, you hearing me, Coursera? Commercial platform. We have made a non-credit, free, truly open, come in and stay as long as you like. 10 years would be fine, thank you. A kind of not impossible situation. And here's what Larry Doyle said. Completion, ModPo is an ongoing relationship. Completion measures a transaction. Get on, get your ticket punched, get off. There is no completion to the ModPo community and the close reading process. That was Larry Doyle. I didn't even know who Larry Doyle is. Where did you come from, Larry?
Love it.
And then Lowe Whittington writes this. This made me very excited. And if everybody's watching, I don't know if Zach is showing only me or if he's showing everybody in the MOOC, or sorry, in the whatever this Zoom. We're in the MOOC. The Zoom. Zach, show the faces of everybody. I'm going to read Lowe Whittington. Here's what Lowe said. The commodification of education through certified completion aimed at providing a credential for hire, H-I-R-E, does not account and does not allow for the necessity in the lives of many people to simply savor learning and rest in its possibilities as long as the urge demands. If I felt I had a time limit on a MOOC, I wouldn't sign up. My time is my time. My learning is my learning at this point in my life. I hope ModPo in particular is part of my learning week, always and forever. That was Lowe Whittington. Wow. Is that cool, people? Lowe, I hope you're watching and will call us. Everybody's nodding. Welcome. It's week 6. We have Ginsberg, Kerouac, Bob Kaufman, one poem by Robert Creeley, although he's not a beat, whatever. Anne Waldman's Rogue State, Baraka's amazing poem, Incident, Baraka's piece for the New American Poetry, written in 1959, published in the New American Poetry, How You Sound. We have Jane Cortez, She Got, He Got, and a huge, huge, huge array of ModPo Plus poets, including the now Sakaki, a poem called Little People, which we may or may not talk about in the next little bit of time. And I called that out because the Global Study Group is talking about little people this week. So, who among us is going to be following the Twitter feed? Lily, are you up for Twitter tonight? Okay, thank you, Lily Applebaum. Facebook. So, Amber Rose, Facebook okay. Amber Rose And Amber Rose will do what she usually does, which is post something in the Facebook feed. So if you go to the ModPo group in Facebook, you can find Amber Rose's post and you can comment. The forum thread, Dave Poplar forum thread. Could you find that? You're able to find that? Thank you. And let's get 2 people on the YouTube chat. Allie and Kate, would you do that? Okay, thank you very much. All right. We have a special guest here tonight joining us actually live in the Arts Cafe in Philadelphia. And the magical Zoom thingy kind of makes it not seem that Dan Bergman, with Michael Bergman sitting to his right and your left. Michael is just a conveyor of the brilliance of Dan Bergman. Minor league conveyor, because Dan does his own spelling and Michael will convey. And Dan is here. Oh, look, we're getting a view. There's Dan and Michael, and they are back. Dan was here as a learner the first year. He says that the first essay he wrote on Dickinson 10 years ago was the first essay he'd ever written. It was quite amazing. Then Dan took this course in person for credit here at the University of Pennsylvania in this room. Then Dan went on to Harvard and recently earned a bachelor's degree from Harvard and was recently featured on CBS Sunday Morning, an amazing opinion piece, which I highly recommend. All you have to do is Google Dan Bergman, 2 N's, CBS, and you will find it, and you really should watch it. Welcome, Dan and Michael and Meredith, whom you can't see, who's sitting in the audience. Okay, here we go. How about 610-616-3208? How about the aforementioned Nanao Sakaki? I'm going to read the poem. At some point this evening, Lainey is going to give us a prompt from Joanne Kiger and a prompt from Bob Kaufman and ask us a really fabulously difficult question. No, it's not difficult.
It's not going to be hard.
A brain-bending question, and I can't wait for that, so we'll get to that at a certain point. But here's small people. So I would like to ask Erica, Allie, Dave, and Kate, briefly each, to comment on this poem. And if you're scrambling to look for it, it's in ModPo Plus for week 6. But I'll read it aloud. Small people. Inch by inch, little snail, creep up and up Mount Fuji. And it's kind of an epigraph because there's a dash and it says Issa, 19th century haiku poet. Quote, a Navajo woman identifies 801 specimens of desert insects. And that quote is attributed to an American scientist, recorded 1948. 3 million abandoned children in big Brazilian cities. 3 million soldiers in red China. A Pennsylvanian sea lily fossil 300 million years old from the Santa Fe Basin, now paperweight on my desk. I want to be a lightning bug for the coming 300 million light years dark age. Wow, I love that. Okay, Erica, anything you want to say about this Sakaki poem? It is beat in a way. You might want to comment on its beatness or anything.
It's a stunning poem, and I'm really interested in how tightly constructed the poem is, which is an interesting thing in Beat Week, where we're, with Ginsberg and spontaneous prose, we're getting a lot of lines that are just expansive, and this feels very Williams or Creeley-ish in how intentionally the stanzas and the line breaks are working to further amplify what the language in the poem actually is. And it's so beautiful the way that the poem kind of puts us in our place, which is another interesting contrast to the largeness of the I that we get in a lot of the beat writers.
So does it have any relation to the beats? I mean, you've really described it as a very distinct thing.
Yeah, of course, I think it has a relation to the beats because it's I don't mean this to be a cop-out, but Creeley is this week. So I'm for whatever reason, I'm thinking of I Know a Man as I'm reading this, although the content of the two poems are very, very different. But there's something going on that's very sound focused and also very focused on, activism and kind of drawing attention to change that needs to happen.
There's also a beat. We'll turn to Allie Castleman in a second. There's also a beat sideshow. That's the wrong word. There's a bend in the river when you get to Gary Snyder and Joanne Kiger and Philip Whalen and Nanao Sakaki. They're interested in making sure that they visit Japan and actually take Buddhism seriously. They're interested in looking from California further west rather than east. Meanwhile, the other beats are going east, west, east, west, east, west, New York, San Francisco, and that group was looking in a different tradition. In fact, this relates to the question that prompts that Laney's going to give us a little later. Fantastic. Okay, and that's something that ModPo should be exploring. It's not just the ecstatic long line beat, but there's a different beat. And I think Ferlinghetti, not a poet I really admire that much, but Ferlinghetti does sometimes what Sakaki does at the end, this little trick. I want to be a lightning bug for the coming 300 million. It's kind of jokey in the sense. It turns that 300 million into light years dark age. Allie Castleman, thoughts on this Sakaki poem in ModPo Plus?
Yeah, I mean, talk about the darkness surrounds us.
Nice.
I think there's a really lovely build to the kind of like stakes in this poem. So you get this kind of, I'm also just interested in the kind of like found language element that begins. Yeah. The first two stanzas, or I guess you could see one of them as being an epigraph. But I think with the first stanza, inch by inch, little snail, creep up and up Mount Fuji, it kind of brings to mind this like Sisyphusian struggle. Yeah. And yet by the end, there's just this like delight in getting to defy that. Yes. And it's almost like a celebration of the surrounding darkness just because it provides the opportunity to be that tiny infinitesimal like little lightning bug. Nice.
That's great, Allie. Thank you. Dave Poplar, a brief comment on this, and then we'll turn to Kate.
First, just let me preface this by saying I haven't read this before and was not told about it before.
What was Amber Rose saying earlier about spontaneity?
I can plan for that, but it usually takes me like a week or so before I understand even a nursery rhyme. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So,
you've been using this flimsy faux excuse for 10 years. It doesn't wash anymore. You're brilliant. Just talk.
I think it still washes, but like one thing I just it strikes me about this poem is just sort of a stylistic thing and how expertly this starts from 100,000 feet above such a broad scope, and it's so broad it almost seems timeless and universal, and it's subjective, and then it becomes immediately narrow and immediate and subjective and almost quotidian with the line, now paperweight on my desk. I just love how that just funnels everything to a super narrow immediate point, and then the next thing it just goes back out to a broad scope again. So I just really like the way that poem does that. Nice.
That is in some slight way the metapoetic turn, because we realize he's at a writing desk with the paperweight, right? That's very cool. Kate, your thought on this, and then we have someone on the phone who's going to ask us a question. We don't know what it is yet, so.
I'm struck in this poem by its contrast with Ginsberg and Kerouac, who drew from the, Whitmanian tradition that, extended on to Charles Olson, who comes up in, the Baraka work. Just the inclusiveness, the like panned out wide scale, drawing in, throwing in everything into the pan, or their, sort of attempts to do that in these big, expansive, inclusive, long-lined poems. And here we're seeing this contrasting attempt to gesture at scale and like history and time, but in this very, concise, pared down way that does remind me a lot of Creeley, but also, puts me in mind of Ray Armentrout and some of her sort of collaged, not minimalist, but very, they are minimal to a degree, poems.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's what I'm thinking about is time.
I love that. That's great. Yes, scale is a big issue. Dan has a comment on this, and then we're going to go to the phone. Oh, you need to put the mic near you, Michael. Thank you.
Does that work?
Yes, you're good.
Dan says the repeat of the 3 million gradually makes these huge numbers seem accessible. Also, a lightning bug is a light that goes on and off.
Dan, you're unbelievable. That's totally right. You made 2 points that were great. Thank you, Dan. So what we're going to do is go to the phone, and I would like for Kanar, Amber Rose, and Jason, and of course Dan at the end of that, to make a comment on whatever this phone caller has to say. Kanar, Amber Rose, Jason. Who's on the phone, Chris?
We have Matt calling in from Pittsburgh.
This is Matt.
Yeah, Matt Lutwin.
Matt Lutwin, the superstar first-timer. Hey,
Indeed.
Matt.
Aw. Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can. Are you real? This is really your first year?
Cool. This is my first year. The last year, in, I think late November, I discovered ModPo.
Late November, we were done with the symposium mode. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went through some of it on my own, but I just returned to the videos on YouTube, and I've learned a lot in the last year just from that.
Well, Matt, you're amazing. You are, you're a rookie of the year so far. You're really amazing in the forums. You're very devoted to the whole thing. Before you make a point or ask a question to which Kanar, Amber Rose, Jason, and Dan are going to reply, can I ask you what's the, I mean, there are obvious differences, but what's the main difference between discovering ModPo in late November and tootling around through the spring, winter, spring, and summer, and then this symposium mode where we're all together? What are some of the differences you've experienced?
Oh, well, I think the differences are sort of emblematic of like this whole deal for me, and that is that when you're reading poetry sort of in your apartment like I do, and you think about it, you might sort of ask your walls or your cats what they think about the poems, but to read the poems and then to know that maybe in the morning, you can make a post about it or comment about it, someone will respond. To sort of experience poetry reciprocally like that is, I think, just all gravy. For example, in the office hours that I've been attending, we do the close readings in collaboration, and I thought last week, wow, there's no way I could have read Boyd Breaking Glass and got out of it what I got out of it in Jason's office hours.
Jason.
And so, yeah, so for me, this is it's indispensable, and so I'm really grateful for it. I think that answers the question.
Thank you, Matt. It does answer the question. You're terrific. So, do you want to make a point or ask a question for the group, and then we'll ask you to hang up and listen to the responses through YouTube?
Yeah. before, I'd like to do some gathering paradise and note that there is an event online tonight at 8 p.m. hosted by the Poetry Project. And Rosemary Waldrop will be reading from her new book, The Nick of Time. And I think you can still RSVP, so I want to shout that out. Okay, but
Matt, that's really cool, because before we went on the air, or when we were on the air, but people couldn't understand what we were saying, we were talking about that. 8 p.m., Poetry Project. We are big Rosemary Waldrop fans. Kate is actually going to see Rosemary, one-on-one tomorrow or the next day, and lives a few blocks away. And we had the honor of visiting Kate and others in Providence and hanging out with Rosemary. She's quite a poet and really important. And you will find Rosemary in the main syllabus and also ModPo Plus in both weeks 9 and 10. So Rosemary is important. Okay, thanks for the plug. Let's go on to your question or comment.
Yeah. So this week I've been looking for inroads to the beat poets and the poets in the syllabus. And what I'm thinking about are two things. One is the element or dimension of sound or voice. The elements that are added to the poem when it is read aloud, and read aloud in the ways that the poems of this week are read aloud. And what that lends to these poems that I think is at least unique among the poems that we've studied so far. So I guess I'm interested in maybe discussing or hearing what other folks think about that new, what is new about the sound or the voice of these poems. So that's my first inroad. The second one.
Wait, Matt.
I'm thinking about
Matt,
yeah, go ahead.
You only get one inroad. No, I'm serious.
Got
we
it.
can.
That's cool.
You just asked the giant question about sound. Can we defer on the second one?
We can defer.
Oh, you're the best.
Yeah,
you're not only rookie of the
good.
year, but you're you fit right in. You understand. We can't wait to talk about sound. Let's leave it there.
Cool.
And will you hang up and then so someone else can call and then listen to what we say in response, and then maybe post
absolutely
and post your response to the responses as you usually do in the forum, and we'll look for it there. Cool.
Okay.
Thank you,
good.
Matt.
Thank you.
Thank
everyone.
you, man. Oh, you're good. Matt is great. Really great. So responses to to sound, and really Matt was asking what's new this week? What do this week's poem contribute to the sound of poetry, or at least to the experience of that? Kanar, Amber Rose, Jason, and Dan.
It's such a great and I think massive question in a certain way. I know I've spent vast periods of time with Ginsberg's Howl repeating in my own head, just because there is something to the delivery of that poem that's really tremendous, but also just it gets you in a certain kind of a groove, and you have to just kind of go along with it despite it being a longer poem, and just sort of listen to the sound of Howl, kind of howling as it were. But yeah, I guess I'm a sort of ill-formed thought for the moment is we have the Cortez and the Waldman kind of pieces as well this week, which are in video form, I think, on the ModPo site, but that are actually much more performed pieces, which is just kind of making me think a little bit about what it's like to write poetry in a moment in which the possibility of being recorded as a speaker and as a reader, as a poetic voice, is increasingly easy and sort of widespread. Maybe that leads to sort of these very expensive and unique and kind of often very incredible reading styles, just from a kind of sonic perspective.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kanar. Amber Rose, what are your thoughts on this? This is a big deal, the sound this week.
It's a huge question. Yeah, and it is a really big deal this week. I'm thinking that So what we have in a poem, right? We have the words, we have the page itself, we have punctuation, and all of those things are adding layers of meaning. Sound further extends the layer of meaning, right? So when we take a poem like Rogue State, we can read that and have one kind of interpretation of Rogue. But what Anne Waldman does with her voice actually gives us a whole new set of sensory information that then informs how we're able to engage with the poem, what kind of meanings and relations we're able to make with the language that's present on the page. I'm also thinking about Amiri Baraka's Incident, which is a poem that the way that he uses punctuation creates this nearly sonic staccato that amplifies the intensity of the poem, right? So if you were to look at that poem and just read it without any of the punctuation, it still might hit. But what those periods and what those commas do is create a pause that we actually hear and feel that intensifies the kind of shock in that moment. It creates this sort of temporal rupture where the emotional impact continues to build because he interrupts the continuous flow. So that's a moment where we're hearing what the punctuation is doing, and the sonic layer is extending the meaning making in the poem, even without an audio representation.
Oh, snaps. And what folks at home, what Amber Rose Johnson just did is a model, if I may, Amber Rose, is a model for close listening that derives from close reading. Sometimes we think, oh, close listening, I'll listen to Ginsberg perform and I will forget that there was a text. But Ginsberg was very text-based, even though he performed so well. But what Amber Rose did is what I think scholars and critics and theorists are doing now, especially now that there's so much available, so many recordings available, that they become primary, but you want to look at the text and do a phonotextual reading that moves from close reading to close listening. And I just think that's a great, your example of Baraka's Incident is great, because we don't even have a recording of Baraka performing that poem, and yet we know its sound. So great. Amber Rose, thank you. Jason and then Dan, and as Jason prepares to speak, let me just put the word out that we want someone to call 610-616-3208 or Skype, ModPo Pen. We're also, after Jason and Dan, we're also going to take a look at Twitter, Facebook, the forum thread, and the YouTube chat. So keep going, folks. All right, Jason, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I really like what Amber Rose did and her idea of how the sound of a poem can amplify what's going on in the writing. Two things came to mind. There is, in ModPo Plus, there are two things that I think are really useful for thinking about kind of orality and sound. One is Jerome Rothenberg on sound, where he talks about sounding, kind of a sense in a similar sense to how you sound, perhaps. But he says, so Jerome Rothenberg is really interested in, among other things, oral cultures and poetry that is passed down only orally, where there's not kind of culture of the alphabet or of script writing. And so he says the poetry sounding becomes the poetry reading. Poetry becomes the sounding, not the script or part, the preparation or notation, but the sounding. Where there is no writing, the sounding truly renews the poem. And one other thing I found really useful reading under the Clark Coolidge heading in ModPo Plus, the overview of influence of jazz on the beats.
Yeah.
And in that piece, there are 3 jazz pieces mentioned. Lester Leaps In by Lester Young, Night in Tunisia by Dizzy Gillespie, and Blues for Alice, of which there's a Clark Coolidge poem with the same title, by Charlie Parker. And so I did something that I wanted to try to do in my office hours, which is to both play, because in the piece, it talks about how a lot of these people that we are reading would actually perform their poems with jazz backup, just like in the video, She Got Hot.
Yes.
And so I was listening to those 3 pieces and reading the poems aloud, or listening to the audio of the poets reading aloud, and or just reading on the page as the music was playing.
Nice.
Which really helped get a sense of the kind of new rhythms that are at play.
I love that, and I think you're suggesting a practice ever so much, as Amber Rose did, a reading practice, going from reading to close listening. Jason's suggesting a way that we can read these poems, having music, perform them yourself, and have music playing not in the background but as part of the poem. I think if Jake Marmer were here, he would be standing up and applauding. Thank you, Jason. I want to. We have Ray Maxwell on the phone. I want to turn to Dan for a comment on this last segment, and I also want to take a survey of chats that are out there, and then I'm gonna ask Lainey, Erica, and Allie to respond to whatever Ray has to say. So there's a 3-ring circus going on here. Dan Bergman, Michael, what is Dan saying about all this?
Dan says, you know, as someone whose sounds, because of my autism, are deracinated from my meaning, I want to point out that in more traditional poetry there is always sound in rhyme and meter accentuating the meaning. But in this week's poems, sound is allowed to push conventional meaning aside to create a more important meaning.
Holy shit.
Come on, Dan.
Someone needs to write that as a book, Dan. Can you read the first couple of sentences of that again?
You know, as someone whose sounds, because of my autism, are deracinated from my meaning, I want to point out that in more traditional poetry there is always sound in rhyme and meter accentuating meaning. But in this week's poems, sound is allowed to push conventional meaning aside to create a more important meaning.
Wow. Thank you, Dan. Amazing. I'm glad that this session is being recorded and that there are many people out there seeing it all so they can actually take that in, think about it more. Wow. Thank you, Dan. Ray Maxwell is on the phone. Can Ray hear me? Hi, Ray.
Hey, Al. How are you?
Hey, how was your week? Good?
It was pretty good. I'm very busy now that I'm retired and not working, but it's
I
okay.
know. It gets busier, but you're involved in so many things. Tell me a ModPo highlight of this past week. I know you've been busy doing lots of things.
I have. The ModPo highlight is that I just started a new August Wilson class. You know, I've done this thing for 8 sessions now, and I built the course based on the ModPo model of close reading, but we're reading plays instead of poems.
Nice.
But the interesting thing about Beat Week is that I've done this whole genealogy of August Wilson's influences. And he was a poet for many years before he ever wrote a play, and he was heavily influenced by the Beats, by the confessional poets, and by the Black Mountain poets. He even mentioned some of them by name.
Yeah.
And he never, he was never big time as a poet, but he was certainly big time as a playwright. But the poetry is infused in his monologues, in his playwriting, and in this setting of the scenes, everything is just poetry.
Yeah.
In one play at Bahraini, I took the scene set of the play in prose and broke it up into stanzas, and it's epic poetry. It's epic poetry.
Yeah.
So
and I saw you post. I saw you post these lineages from August Wilson and to August Wilson somewhere, maybe Facebook. But if you would do us the favor of creating a thread or adding to an existing thread to show us that info again, I think that'd be interesting for a lot of people.
I can do that. I certainly can do that.
Okay, Ray.
The other thing is the other thing is just an announcement I wanted to make. We're doing this. Speaking of the sound of poetry, we're doing this open mic Saturday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And basically, people are going to bring in the poetry that they wrote during and after and in response to the COVID lockdown.
Yes, I saw that.
So the Zoom link is going to be on the Facebook page and several different forum groups, and we're hoping for a good turnout.
So that's Saturday, this Saturday, and the time again is
Saturday.
Yep. What's the time?
7 p.m. I'll probably open the door at 6:30.
Okay, 6:30. The doors of the Zoom will open at 7. There's an open mic meeting, reading, sponsored by Ray and other ModPo people. I think it's
friends.
Great. And friends, Ray and friends. All right, Ray. Thank you so much for calling. Have a great evening. Be well.
Thank you.
Thanks as
Appreciate
always. Okay, that was Ray Maxwell calling from Washington. So let's turn to Lily for Twitter, Amber Rose for Facebook, Dave for the forum, YouTube chat, Allie and Kate. And I'm going to ask Lainey, Erica, and Allie to respond in turn to anything that they hear. So, Lily, what do we have in Twitter?
Okay, we've got some tweeters tonight, which is exciting. Milena Akko is doing a really wonderful job kind of recapping comments, and I really liked Milena's rephrase of Amber Rose's comment that Amber Rose showed us a model for close listening based on close reading a poem talking about Baraka's incident. Ray said if he didn't get through that I should announce the open mic. So Ray, I'm glad you got through. Let's see. Kim Coveni is following along.
Kim.
Hi, Kim from Barcelona.
Yeah, from Barcelona.
Kim
That's
says
right.
it's a late night with a little heart.
Really late.
A person named Aristel says, "Oh, hi, ModPo Live. It's been a while. Read years, but I can actually catch the webcast today." So Aristel, welcome back.
Yay. Very cool. Thank you, Lily. I love this part of the webcast where we find out that there are people all over the place. Amber Rose, Facebook, anything happening?
Yeah, shout out to Dan Melton, who's hanging out with me in the Facebook. YouTube got popular, so no one's hanging out with me on Facebook anymore. But shout out to you, Dan. I appreciate your company and your commentary. Dan is in here making some comments about sound. And made a comment, which is something that we definitely think about in ModPo. When there are audio recordings of a poet reading the same poem multiple times, we can hear differences. Sometimes they make textual changes, sometimes they make performative changes, but that can have introduce vastly different meanings for the poem. And he linked to a recording of Something in the Way of Things by Amiri Baraka, and this time
backed by the Roots.
Backed by the Roots, which I hadn't seen before. Incredible band, so folks should definitely check that out. Margaret Stevens asked a question about how small people related to Beat Week, but I think Erica tackled that a little earlier in the webcast.
Margaret's also been great in ModPo this year. Thank you so much. Yeah, Dan. And Dan's point, I mean, not to brag too much, but Pen Sound has made all that really possible. You can there's like 16 different Creelys reading that poem, right? And you can really do a study of it without working too hard into the archives. Very cool. Okay, Dave, anything in the forum thread?
Couple comments. Martin Porter says, I'm always interested in where beat poetry or any poetry had its roots and where the branches end up. And mentor Nicholas Stern First points out that there's a lot of material here, including by Jake Marmer, who has an excellent piece in ModPo Plus from his book Cosmic Diaspora that illustrates the spirit of the improvisation, which is maybe what the beats were all about. Was the beat agenda to subvert the agenda in the agenda? Doesn't it seem like being in the moment isn't such a breeze after all, and that the freedom to improvise freely requires a lot of discipline?
Denny, that's amazing. Denny, I know you're watching, Denny, because it's nice and early out there. Zach, I'm just going to take the moment, the opportunity. This is Denny's book. It's a beautiful book, full of art. Really nice. And I have a rare copy. Whoa, I have a rare copy, so I can't give it away. But yay, Denny Stern. Okay, and Allie and Kate, what's going on in the YouTube chat, which seems to be the center of the universe?
There's a rousing conversation about women, beat women, and sidelining of women in the beat tradition and the poetic treatment of women in their work. And Mandana and Hannah and Sanjeev are all going at it on that.
That's great. What a crew. Yeah, and we are trying to do our part in making sure that the beat syllabus, hears those. For instance, Elise Cowan is in ModPo, and that was a voice that just really was unheard for many years. Yay, Elise Cowan, quite an amazing character. Allie, anything else from the YouTube chat you want to add?
Yeah, there was also a lot of love for Dan and his comment, a lot of wows. There's also a lot of cheering on Bob Kaufman and wanting to talk about some of his work. A bit earlier in the conversation, Jay Liu said, Sakaki and the beats, the constellation of suffering, the scale of pain versus the cosmological scale of time and space, but that noble smallness. And then Darlene Laguna responded, light years suggests a lightness, not just a length of time or distance.
Yes.
Which I think is very lovely.
Darlene is such a sensitive reader of poetry. Darlene, if you're hearing this, you need to revive the LA area meetup team, or maybe you're doing it and just not telling us. I want to invite Lainey, Erica, and Allie, as promised, just to respond briefly. Before you do that, we can bring up the person on the phone, so that they're not sitting there waiting. Who is it, Chris?
Sorry, I wasn't ready with my microphone. You were fast there, Al.
I know. It's the only skill that I have is that I'm fast.
Disagree.
Amber Rose and I ran the other day, and I was slow, but that was special because, I was talking the whole time. Actually, Amber Rose was talking the whole time. Anyway, back to you, Chris.
Calling from Ohio, we have Eileen on the line.
Cool. Hello, Eileen. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Hey, is this your first time calling?
It sure is.
Are you nervous?
A little bit.
Oh, don't be. We're very friendly. Eileen, what we're going to do is we're going to talk for a little while you're on the phone, because I promised we would turn to some friends, and then you can add something or add a question or comment. We can go from there. Sound okay?
Okay.
Okay, great.
It sounds great.
Good. So I'm asking Lainey, Erica, and Allie to comment on anything that they heard in the social media. Lainey first.
So many interesting things. It's actually hard to choose. So I quickly wanted to say something in response to women in the beats, and just say that Diane DePrima has been in my thoughts this week. There will be plans for Diane DePrima.
Brown,
Diane
coordinator of ModPo, takes over from Anna and is plotting. Notice that there's no Diane DePrima in ModPo.
I have to say, I was sad.
You're
devastated.
a radical. You're trying to get DePrima in there.
No, well, as Al and I were discussing before the webcast, there's only so many poems that can go in this main syllabus. But I mean, Diane DePrima belongs in Beat Week, so some way or another. I'm thinking about Memoirs of a Beatnik and how
Perfect.
When I read that, what a huge impression that had on me, and her revolutionary letters, and of course her recent passing. It seems like 5 minutes ago,
Yes.
but was it in the past year?
Shall we just say, Lainey Brown, that after the symposium mode, we're going to take a breath, and then we're going to go into the studio, and we're going to invite some friends.
Yes.
And we're going to make some new videos.
Totally.
Based on all the observations that Lainey is making about things that are missing.
There's always more. So there's that. And then I just wanted to quickly respond to this. I can't remember who brought this up, so forgive me, but this question of the ability to listen to many, many recordings of the same poem over time is something that I really love about this archive for this class. And one thing that came up in my office hours this week, or maybe in my class, was that
You don't even know.
I don't remember which Zoom it was, but fantastic people. But in some of the recordings of Creeley reading I Know a Man, you hear laughter in the
At
audience.
Harvard.
And others you don't.
Those
And
Harvardians.
So the question
they
was,
were nervous.
well, is it funny or is it not funny? Why do some people? But the thing is that there's this other element to the close listening collectively in live space, which is that the audience also changes how the poem is received. It keeps changing.
Yes.
Which is, I love that.
I love it too. Thank you, Lainey. Erica and then Allie, briefly, a comment on what you heard in the chats.
Yeah,
Erica, do you have a friend you need to reintroduce?
Oh, this is Lola.
Lola. Hey, Lola.
She loves Zoom, and especially when it's after a long day of work for me. So Lainey and I are totally on the same wavelength, because I was also thinking about Diane de Prima and specifically her revolutionary letters. And
Right.
I also, when it comes to thinking about the question of women and the beats and performance and sound and improvisation, for me, I feel like Anne Waldman is really central to how that continues to develop. And also, I think that Waldman continues to remind us of a lot of these questions around sound and performance. And I know that, for example, with A Rogue State, we have the recording in ModPo. I've also had the pleasure of hearing her perform it a few times. And each time the poem changes depending on the moment that she's performing it. And so I would just echo Lainey and also cheerlead Anne Waldman.
Yes, more Waldman.
It sounds like I'm going to have to take this class again.
Eileen, of course, there's no such thing as taking it once. Absolutely not. So, Eileen, what I'd like you to do is say whatever you want to say, because we're totally free and agendaless here. And then I'm going to ask Dave, Kate, Knar, and Amber Rose to each briefly comment on any aspect of what you're saying to us. So, Eileen, you have the floor. What do you want to say?
First off, I loved Rogue State. The actual her reading it on stage, because I'm a stage poet. I've done some slams, and so stage work is my passion. And then during the ModPo Plus, I found Ferlinghetti, and his reading of it is so snarky compared
Baseball
to reading
canto. Baseball canto. Yeah.
Yes, snarkiness, just pure snarkiness when you hear him reading it,
Yes.
versus reading it to yourself.
Yes.
And that was the first time I'd ever heard him read it.
Yeah.
I had read it myself, and does anybody else hear the snarkiness?
Oh, totally. It's shticky. That performance is shticky, meaning it's like almost vaudevillian.
Okay, as long as I'm not the only one that hears it, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Eileen, how performative are you? Are you very performative?
I've performed in slams from Ohio to Eugene, Oregon.
Do you have Rogue State kind of in your ear? Can you hear in your mind's ear? Can you hear Anne doing Rogue State?
Oh yeah.
Can you do it?
Oh, yeah.
Can you just do a little Rogue State for us? Just say the phrase Rogue State.
Oh,
the way.
no.
No, you're not that
no.
performative.
Oh, no.
I'll do it.
No.
Wait, who wants to do it? Amber Rose, can you do it?
Rogue.
Wow, that was good. Are you feeling it, Eileen?
That was great. That was great.
Are you feeling it?
Oh, I'm feeling it. That's
Good.
awesome.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. But see, the thing about Amber Rose Johnson is that she's always in a rogue state. Look out. Because gated communities tremble. Hey, Eileen, thank you for being a ModPoer, and thank you for bringing up the importance of performance, and thank you for performing poetry everywhere. So what we're going to do is...
I love it.
Great. We're going to ask you to hang up and listen to some responses to this general question of performativity, Waldman's Rogue State, and so forth. And I hope you'll call us again soon, okay?
I will. Thank you.
All right, Eileen. Thank you. That's Eileen calling from Ohio. So Dave, Kate, Knar, and Amber Rose, lightning round, quick, because then I'm going to turn to Lainey, who's got a couple of little prompts for us to talk about sort of maybe possibly Buddhism or that trend. Sorry, I gave it away. Quick responses to just the general question that Eileen is interested in: performativity, the sound of the poet. In the case of Ferlinghetti, which is a poem that some of you probably don't know, this kind of oh my gosh, just over the top, sound. So, Dave first.
Yeah, I think I have a dissenting view on Rogue State in the sense that I find it really, really, really difficult to listen to. And I know that's largely the point, but I find it so unpleasant that it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, I get the point, but I don't like it that much where I don't want to subject myself to it. And I think that's okay, because I do get the point, and I'm not saying that it's not poetry, I shouldn't like it or anything like that, but I think it's okay to just personally not like it but still appreciate it. It's almost like how I view bananas, because I love the concept of bananas and they're great, they make so much sense, but the actual experience of eating them is not something I enjoy despite wanting to. So I recognize that bananas are great, but they're just not going to be a part of my day-to-day experience. And I think that's okay to do that with poems too. And that's what my impression of Rogue State is.
Oh my God, that was a lightning round. How are you getting your potassium? You need potassium in your diet. You gotta have bananas.
There are other ways to get potassium.
Yeah, I know.
Bananas.
Name one.
Don't let Big Banana fool you.
You really what?
Let Big Banana, the whole banana lobby, fool you into thinking that they're the only way to get banana.
Yeah, banana. It's a banana conspiracy. All right, Dave. Thanks for that lightning round. No, Dave's actually bespeaking a point of view that a lot of ModPo people feel about the Waldman, and which is why it's there. Kate, Knar, Amber Rose, real quick each. Kate?
Yeah, extending from what Dave said, I think for me, what's so intriguing about her performance is, and I haven't heard her perform it live personally, but returning to the idea of the laughter in the Creeley poem, is it funny, is it not? In the recording, the ModPo recording of Anne Waldman performing Rogue State, there's a lot of laughter. And I just have to wonder if it's uncomfortable laughter, if the audience knows always when she's performing it, whether they're laughing with her or at her or with discomfort. I think she's courting discomfort. I think she's trying to be ugly and unbecoming at times.
Witchy.
Really,
Yeah.
It's very radical in that
Yes.
way, and I think she's playing with the audience and the audience's reactions.
Yes. Well, the recording was in this room, and it was the smaller version of the room because we've renovated it. But she was behind the podium, and there was a little space, a little triangular space behind her in the old Arts Cafe, and she was using her proximity to the microphone to go back and forth to modulate her volume by proximity to the mic. And at one point, she moved so far back, she crashed into the back wall. And when she moved forward, she knocked the podium and the mic. And it was at that point she herself laughed. She was doing this sort of final rogue state. I'm in a rogue state of mind. And everybody started laughing, I would say but also we were worried that Ann Waldman would tip over the podium and the mic would crash. She was so roguish. It was amazing, yes. So this is totally relevant. And here's the term I would use. We're going to turn to Kanar. Here's the term I would use. The term is paraphonotextuality. Paraphonotextuality. That is, the phonotext is the sound of the recording of the poem, but the paraphonotext is all the laughter and the noise of the podium and the crashing of the mic, and that paraphonotextuality is only in a particular performance, and Ann Waldman is the best at producing in others paraphonotext, which is permanently on record in pen sound everywhere you hear Waldman, not just Waldman, but so many others. And another great example is, of course, Ginsberg getting drunk when he reads America. And everybody is so drunk in the audience that you can actually hear the gallon jugs of bad red wine crashing against each other. That's paraphonotext, too. I just love how Waldman pulls that off. It is just so fantastic. Kanar and Amber Rose, quickly each.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. My dog.
That's your dog.
He wants to participate. Sorry about that. He's a rogue state right now. But,
what is he reacting? Was it my screaming rogue state?
You know, he might also be detecting that I am coming through the computer, maybe. I'm sorry. He's normally very quiet, but I'm thinking about...
It's okay, Kanar. We love it. That's paraphonotext.
It is paraphonotextual, yeah. But I love some of the terminology Kate was using in terms of it being this kind of ugly, unbecoming thing. The word I was thinking about was kind of abject, in the sense of like Chris Davis' idea of like the thing we thrust aside in order to live. I feel like I really hear that in Rogue State in a way I find totally delightful. It's so guttural, and you can really like feel it as a set of sounds coming from a body, which I think is tremendous. And yeah, that kind of has this effect too of just really defamiliarizing this thing of like the rogue state, which is this term that is trying to kind of accomplish some sort of political disavowal or whatever, right? It's kind of often tied up in empire speak, and it's like,
That's
okay,
right.
let's grab that term back and really like put it into the body, and I think that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, well said. Amber Rose, quickly, and then Dan has a comment, and then we're going to go to the phone. There's so many things happening. Then we're going to turn to Lainey. Oh, my gosh.
Okay, really quickly, I'll just make a comment about the Jane Cortez piece, because what I'm thinking about there is not just what she's doing with her voice, but about the sonic atmosphere that she creates. So she's accompanied by a musician, and thinking about, oh, I forgot the phrase that you were just using,
Paraphonotext. Yeah, the paraphonotext.
Yeah, so Jane Cortez chooses to create a sonic context in which the poem is delivered, which is what the accompaniment is doing. And that's adding a whole other layer of meaning. So whereas the rogue, the sort of instability that we hear in Ann Waldman's voice, it's the accompaniment behind Jane Cortez that's like creating this unstable, chaotic feeling environment. And then her voice is layered on top of that. And her voice is actually quite rhythmic. Go in the she got, he got. But the sort of discordance that's created between the two is really, really rich and interesting.
Yeah. We're going to turn to Dan. Let me just put out a little program note. that Amber Rose and I just recently decided to do a Poem Talk episode about what? What are we doing it on?
She got hot.
Yeah, we're going to do that we haven't put it all together, so maybe some others of you will join for that Poem Talk sometime in December. Long overdue, Jane Cortez in Poem Talk. We're going to go to Dan, then we're going to go to the phone, then we're going to go to Lainey, and Jason is going to get to respond first to Lainey because we haven't heard from Jason in a few minutes. So, Dan, what do you have to say?
Dan says, Dave, since you stepped on Rogue State and slipped, could you record a version that you do like?
Holy shit, Dan. So Dan's a stand-up comedian now, replacing Ferlinghetti. Man, Michael, are you going to have to go on the road when he takes this to Vegas? Is that what's going to happen?
I'll just follow Dan wherever he takes me.
Oh, my God. And it, kind of used to be the other way, but now you're the extra. I'm telling you, Michael, you have a career ahead of you. Let's see who's on the phone. I have no idea how we're going to do this, but we're going to do it. Chris?
Our pal Denny is calling from Seattle. Remember?
Do I remember Denny? Yes.
Yeah, our trip right before the pandemic started. That trip we squeezed in early 2020.
Not only did we see Denny in Seattle, he came to the ModPo meetup. He also came to a poetry reading we went to. And then he drove to Vancouver to meet us there. That's crazy.
That's such a great trip.
Hey, Denny, can you hear me?
Yeah, Al. I took the train to Vancouver with Terry Talty and her husband, Stuart.
Terry was in from Colorado, so it was really freaky. Hey, Denny, you're a long-time ModPo person, so you're going to be okay with what I'm going to tell you, which is that I would like whatever you have to say, I'd like you to say it briefly. And then that'll be the last call because I want to turn to Lainey and then we have final words and so forth. So can you give us a brief sense of what you'd like us to talk about?
Well, I guess, I mentioned when I wrote a statement about improvisation, and so I intentionally didn't prepare anything to say right at the moment because that's the nature of improvisation, right? You're just on the spot.
Then can I do the following? Can I have you stay on the line, and you'll be one of the people to respond to what Lainey has for us? Would that be good?
That would be incredible. I'd love that.
Okay, so you're a TA for the moment. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to turn it over to Lainey, and I'm going to ask Jason, Erica.
What about Lily?
What's that?
I think we miss Lily.
My gosh, Lily.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Lily. Oh my
Lily
gosh.
Lily gets to talk twice.
Lily has to go 3 times. Okay, Jason, Lily, and Erica, and Denny responding to Lainey. Okay, here we go.
All right. So, I was thinking about Bob Kaufman's jail poems, and specifically number 7. And I wanted to connect it to a tiny fragment from Joanne Kiger's poem, September. So I'll just repeat that again in case you're trying to take a look at those. So part 7 of Jail Poems, and a fragment from Kiger's poem, September, which is in ModPo Plus. So I was thinking about the importance of Buddhism in a lot of the materials this week. And I wondered if you saw any connections between these 2 poems. And I'm just going to read these tiny fragments, and then you can go wherever you like within these poems or any of the materials. Wherever you like. So I'll just read part 7 of Kaufman's Jail Poems. Someone who I am is no one. Something I have done is nothing. Someplace I have been is nowhere. I am not me. What of the answers I must find questions for? All these strange streets I must find cities for. Thank God for beatniks. And then in Joanne Kiger's poem, September, the world of transformation is real and not real, but trusting. And then a little later down, well, I am not myself. So the invitation is any connections, contradictions, observations with thinking of these two poems together or Buddhism in any of the materials in this week.
So we're going from Jason to Lily to Denny on the phone to Erica. Jason first.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely see a connection, and I love both of these poems. I think that there is a kind of beautiful irony in speaking of nothingness, because it creates a paradox, because there are words there and potentially a voice. But it undoes itself and connects us to really what is beyond language, that which can't be said, for which there's no vocabulary for. And also, by being nothing, one is able to be fully present. And it seems like, especially to improvise, one can't be self-conscious. And so I see in both pieces kind of a willingness to get beyond the self, to allow speech beyond the self in.
Wow.
Amazing. I have no words, Jason. I just want to repeat your words. Voice undoes itself. By being nothing, one is able to be fully present.
Talk about Buddhism.
There we are. Nothing and everything. Awesome. Lily, we're on to you.
I don't know anything about Buddhism, but I find in these two passages that you pointed us to, Lainey, a relationship, especially in the Kiger poem, of a world of transformation, and how that's almost a paradox, like to have this named place that exists that we live on, but it's like a contained globe in a world, but it's full of things that are constantly transforming and changing, shifting. And I really get that from the Kaufman poem as well, almost like as soon as he's got a handle on something, it's shifted. Like someone who I am has shifted to no one. Something I have done has shifted to nothing. I stepped onto the street, but I lost the name for the city, etc. So I think that both poets have an interesting way of approaching that, I think, very common feeling of the ground shifting underneath you. And it goes along with a fragmented form as well that we don't see in every single beat poem this week. So that's a cool connection as well.
That that phrase of the ground shifting beneath us is really jumping out at me in your comment, and it makes me think about how, reality is not what we think. We could say that's Buddhist, but we could also say that it's beat, right? Like everything is ripping a hole in the surface of reality, like Howell, right, is trying to pierce through superficial or understandings of the world that we take for granted that aren't necessarily true. So,
and also like altered consciousness of the speaker, like looking out onto the world and kind of seeing a truth, or I don't know, some position that a speaker has that allows them to see that through that thing that's been pierced or altered.
yeah, like all these strange streets I must find cities for.
Nice.
It causes us to reimagine where we are and what our surroundings are and how we understand our place in whatever those surroundings are. Awesome. Thank you, Lily. Next, we go to Denny on the phone. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me there?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, well, I really liked what Lily and Jason, Jason's always amazing, and what both you guys said was really great. And like Lily, I'm not, I don't consider that I know that much about Buddhism, but, and this is kind of me going off on the historical tangent, but, like I look at it like during World War II, then, you had Camus, and the resistance, and then his thinking was very influential in the 50s, and you'd had the horrors of the Holocaust, and existential thinking was maybe in its heyday. I don't know. But where do you go from existentialism? And so I'm kind of wondering or thinking if that was some of the connection with Buddhism, because Buddhism has, I think, a lot in common with existential philosophy, but it seems to have maybe some sort of certainly a more ancient sort of grounding from which people can expand in whatever direction they want. And one of the amazing things about Buddhism is the great tradition of poetry, which was very influential on the beats, going back many hundreds of years, into China, and so poetry is like always in the present, so you can read Sappho and here she is, or someone from the Tang Dynasty like Lai Po, embracing the moon. And so and this is all kind of part of what the beats were about, but they had this amazing discipline, and Bob Kaufman was an expository poet who was like the essence of the improvisatory, because he just didn't even write his poems down for a while. He just spoke them in the present, which is just astounding. And I think his wife began writing them down at some point. At least that's the apocryphal story behind it. And at least now it's taken us many years to catch up to the fact that there were great women writing at the same time. I think I've probably said enough, but so at least we're bringing Prima and Kiger back in the mix. So.
Thank you so much. I'm finding it funny when people say, well, I don't know anything about Buddhism, because it just sounds so Buddhist, right? I feel like we traveled everywhere in your comments, Denny. We traveled in time. We traveled around the world. There's so much there. Yeah.
Hey, Denny, thanks for calling.
You.
We're going to turn to Erica, but will you hang up, and we'll see you in the forums. You're so active. We really appreciate your involvement. Thank you, Denny.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks, Al and Lenny and everybody. Thanks. Yeah.
Take care. See you soon.
Oh, Erica. Sorry. That was my bad. Erica, what would you like to add or ask here?
I mean, I feel like everything everyone has said, I totally agree with, and is really interesting and useful to me. And I'm not going to say the thing that I feel like saying, which is that I don't know anything about Buddhism either. But I just said it, so I violated my own rule. But I'm thinking about attentiveness as being something also that joins these poems, and questioning. And I wanted to, instead of really commenting, I immediately found myself thinking about an excerpt from an essay by Anne Waldman, but maybe it's a poem too. I'm not sure what to call it, called Outrider. And she's talking about her poetics, but also a certain poetic ethos that she's connecting with Ginsberg and with the Jack Kerouac School at Naropa University. So here's something that I think also applies to everything we've been talking about with the Kaufman and the Kiger. So Waldman says, wild mind, elegantly self-disciplined is one of her descriptions of Outrider. And I'm just wondering about, there's, Anne was also Buddhist. So there is this Buddhist element that permeates Anne's work. And what she's doing in this Outrider piece is saying something about beat writing in Buddhism, I think, and also about pedagogy and poetic communication that I just immediately was associating with the two poems that we're looking at.
I'm glad that you mentioned Naropa, because it takes us to a fundamental thing that's ModPo is about, which is that as poetry, so pedagogy. We're going to wrap up with final thoughts, and they're going to have to be brief because we want to end at 1:30 if we possibly can. Thank you, Lainey and Denny, and those who contributed. So we're going to do final thoughts. And if you want, in your final thought, you can respond to the following couple of sentences written by someone in the forums this week. It's week 6, but this person is already pre-mourning the end of ModPo. And so if you want, you can respond to this person with some advice. But otherwise, you can say whatever you want. We're going to start with Lily, and Lainey will be on deck for final thoughts. So the person writes, the hardest thing of ModPo is that it ends, and I'm left bereft just when I feel like the whole universe is about and doing modern poetry. And then it's back to, well, the very real danger of a stagnating brain, because I don't read, say, Gertrude Stein on my own in the off months. That's a rather despondent but also ecstatic comment. So if you want to respond to that person, I didn't catch the name of that person, please do. Or say whatever you want, final thoughts about Beats, or something about next week, which is the New York School, or your office hours, whatever you want. Lily, followed by Lainey.
Well, I have so many thoughts. I guess I would say to that person, make an internet friend in ModPo and go together into Slowpo, or an in-person friend, but make a friend who's already in ModPo and sign on, make yourselves a book club within the syllabus to get to stuff you haven't looked at yet. It's always there, and you can bring in anybody, which is kind of beautiful thing about this crazy space that we create, this world of transformation that we created.
Thank you, Lily. Lainey Brown, final thought, followed by Allie Castleman.
I also want to respond to the person who's devastated that ModPo's over and say, ModPo is never over. That's just an illusion. It's never over.
Does that mean we're going to do weekly webcasts through January, February?
No,
I don't think so.
It just means that this material is always available. And if you don't read Gertrude Stein in the off months, you can.
That's well said. And also, Lainey and Lily are going to confer about Slowpo and about online courses, so there's always those. Thank you, Lainey. Allie Castleman is next, followed by Dan Bergman.
I'm going to give my final words to some musings on reality that have been happening in the YouTube chat, kind of in response to Lainey's comment that it's never over. The end is a kind of like false reality. So Jane Ward says, it is beat to rip a hole through reality. Good way to think about it, exposing some truth or view. And Sanjeev responded saying, do the words on the page, the poem, the writing of it, help create this wormhole into another reality? I would think yes. And then on a slightly goofier note, some people were giving Dave potassium recommendations.
Oh, what are some? What are some? Because Dave didn't know.
Sweet potatoes have potassium,
Good.
potato skins. And then Hannah Linden said, Waldman is potassium. And
Whoa!
so that's
Hannah
the final
Linden.
word.
Oh my gosh, Hannah, you are great. Oh, you know, so Dave is gonna feast on Waldman and then have to go to the hospital for potassium infusions. Oh my gosh. You know what? If that happens, we'll call Ann and she'll call you. And Dave, you'll be all set. That's great. That wasn't so goofy. All right, Dan Bergman, final thought, followed by the aforementioned Dave Poplar.
Dan says, this may be too personal, but I remember watching the videos the first time. And ever since then, Jason, Lily, Allie, Ann, Al, I wanted more than anything to sit with you at this table someday.
Oh, that was pretty sentimental, Dan. That was beautiful. Well, we are honored. Really honored. I mean, you had a long drive. You got a long drive. You're staying overnight here, but then you're going back all the way to nearly Boston, and we're glad that you stopped in Philly, your old place in the Writer's House. Thanks, Dan. We love you a lot and respect you and celebrating your new fame, which is totally deserved. And I believe that in response to CBS, at least one 13-year-old who spells contacted you and is inspired to do what, Michael? What was the 13-year-old?
Now I want to go to college because I know I can.
That's what the 13-year-old said. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Dan Bergman. Thanks for being you. Dave Poplar is next, followed by Kate.
Yeah, it was great to see Dan there at the Kelly Writers House, and I think I could not have better described my reaction to Rogue State than having slipped on it. I don't have anything really substantive to say. As usual, just to plug my office hours, which are tonight at, I guess, 11 p.m. Philly time, I think. So that's all.
Thank you, Dave. Kate, followed by Kanar.
I've been thinking about Baraka's How You Sound, which we didn't get to tonight, but this emerging idea, or not emerging, the idea was already emerged, but it is stated in week 6 in multiple places, Creeley's idea of form never being more than an extension of content, which is a paraphrase of how Olson quoted him in his manifesto. But take that idea really starts to shape our readings of the poems moving forward through ModPo. Also, my office hour is at 10 tomorrow.
Yay. Thank you, Kate. I'm glad that you brought that in. We needed to talk about how you sound, or at least mention it. Kanar, followed by Jason.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the kind of question that was posed by one of our ModPoers in terms of what happens when ModPo ends. And I thought that we could revisit the Bob Kaufman just once again for tonight. What of the answers? I must find questions for all these strange streets. I must find cities for. But you know, I think in a certain way, ModPo is a bunch of strange streets in a really nice way.
Wow.
And find those cities would be maybe like my personal advice. Follow the road, see where they converge. You know, maybe there are people involved, maybe places, poets, poems, people you want to read with. So yeah, and my office hours are tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard, and I'll be on Zoom.
Thank you, Kanar. That stuff about ModPo as those streets in search of a city, I'd really love that idea. That's really, really lovely and inspiring and exciting. Jason, followed by Amber Rose.
Yeah, let's see. I want to say hi to Michael, Dan, and Meredith, and say how great it is that they are present tonight, and that I remember Dan's words from the final webcast of the first.
You were sitting
year.
next to Dan, and you and Michael had to get my attention to let Dan talk in the mic. I remember that.
Yeah. It was
10 years ago.
Profound moment. And I guess I would say wanted to say that the comment that you read, when you read it, to me followed the structure of Creeley's "I Know a Man," going from the grand openness or overwhelmingness to the reality of immediate life, but that in a way, watch out where you're going is in a way a Buddhist rejoinder to self-involvement. And I think a good Buddhist would want to both to be present in every moment and to know that slope po will come up, there will be more, and that one has community just as a reader of poems or as a watcher or as an audience of poetry. Like you are, as a reader, participating in the creation of the poem.
Yes.
And be present and be open to having that authority.
Yes. And the real danger of a stagnating brain is, why not buy a goddamn big car? But the alternative is to look out where you're going. I like that a lot. Thank you. Amber Rose, followed by Erica.
My final word is really brief. One is to boost Paige, who wanted to let you know, Al, and let others know that the LA group is active and meeting regularly. And their next meeting is this Sunday at the Huntington Library, and more info can be found in the Southern California Close Reading Forum in study groups. And I just want to plug in ModPo Plus Doug Kearney, who is a poet that we didn't really talk about today, but who does a great reading of Amiri Baraka's How You Sound, and also just is a fantastic, amazing, brilliant poet who does incredible things with sound and performance and voice. And we have a couple of his poems in ModPo Plus.
Thank you. Great. Both recommendations. And I'm really sorry, Paige, for assuming that you guys weren't together. You're just quietly meeting. In fact, when I was out there at the Huntington Library in September 2019, I met with some of the LA people at the Huntington, and we had such a great time. Erica Kaufman, and then I have a couple announcements and we'll be done. Erica, final thoughts?
I would second the Doug Kearney recommendation, and also again mention the amazing Elise Cohen poems also in ModPo Plus.
Thank you, Erica. So next week, the New York School. We have the New York School Poets. Edwin Torres is going to be here. We're going to be hanging around with Edwin. So there's going to be a webcast with Edwin joining us. There's going to be a recording of a poem talk, which you won't get to see, but you'll hear it, a couple of months later. And there's going to be a 6 p.m. poetry reading. given by Edwin Torres, hosted by the Writers House in our garden under the tent. And I hope I'm going to be encouraging ModPo people to tune in to the live stream of Edwin Torres. And if you're in the Philly area, come and be here in person in our garden under the tent. And if it's cold, we'll have our heaters going. That's Edwin Torres here for the New York School, right? We think of Edwin Torres as maybe more affiliated with week 6, but actually he's here for week 7. He's very excited to talk with us. Thank you to Matt from Pittsburgh, Ray calling from Washington, Eileen calling first time from Ohio, and Denny from Seattle. Chris and Zach, you guys are amazing. You overcame the weird fuzzy bass sound. Yeah, and you did it again. And Leah Baxter, who contributed positive vibes and who's been helping with the tech. Thank you, Leah. Thanks to everybody. Thank you, Lainey. Thanks again, Dan and parents, for showing up. We'll see you all in the forums. We'll see you in your office hours. Please stay with ModPo, even if it's just a couple of hours a week. We want to be with you till the end. Everybody wave. Good night, everybody. We're off the air. Here we go.